Have you ever felt that impulse to hide your plans when someone casually asks, "What are you working on?" That subtle choke in your throat, the vague answer, the quick pivot to another topic. I've been watching a specific pattern for years. People deliberately keep their goals secret, not out of strategy, but out of fear disguised as energy protection. This behavior is not innocent. It is not wise. It is a defense mechanism that systematically blocks prosperity. What I'm going to reveal today is a complete map of the minds of these people, a radiography of how the pattern works behind the scenes of the subconscious, building an invisible barrier between you and your manifestations. More importantly, I will show how this seemingly cautious way of handling dreams hides a deep terror of confronting your own capacity to act. This is not just another growth tip. This is a precise diagnosis of the sabotage that happens when you turn silence about your plans into a shield against failure. And it is how to take the first step to break the destructive cycle that keeps your dreams forever in the realm of idealization and never in the realm of realization. Do you recognize yourself as someone who guards goals with 7 locks, while secretly fearing to take the steps necessary to realize them? Listen closely, because the scene you just recalled is small but honest. It tells us what the mind is busy protecting and why protection has become the enemy of outcome. The deeper analysis starts now. That opening scene looks simple. It happens in kitchens, cafes, and elevator rides. Yet that one small moment contains a whole operating system. When someone pauses and hushes a plan, their mind is not being prudent. It's sending a signal inward. I call this the whisper that proves a truth. If I hide it, it won't be judged. If it is not judged, I won't be exposed. If I am not exposed, I cannot fail publicly. The rest follows like a machine. I say this as an observer who has listened to hundreds of those small silences. Each one carries the same architecture. There is a posture the person adopts in the world and a private story they repeat to themselves at night. The posture is clean, moral, even spiritual. The story is defensive and small. On the surface, they sound like strategists. They use words like timing and energy and protection. They have phrases to make the silence noble. But the inside narrative is, if I commit and fail, I will become small in other people's eyes. So it is safer to keep the plan in my chest. They tell themselves they are different from those who loudly self-promote. They claim to dislike attention. They present secrecy as a moral choice. They call it keeping the energy clean or not attracting the wrong forces. That language feels elevated. It allows them to avoid the real anxiety without appearing cowardly. But the difference between a principled choice and a fearful habit becomes clear when you watch behavior over time. The principled choice leads to disciplined action. The fearful habit leads to recycling ideas and a life of near misses. When I see these people in action, I track 2 tracks, the public explanation and the private calibration. Publicly, they say the right things. Privately, they reroute. They delay deadlines. They cultivate endless preparation. They test ideas in secret and refine them in private until the project becomes a hidden museum of perfection that never opens. They celebrate the idea, not the result. I want to paint how they talk about money. They often speak as if money is a test of their purity. I don't want to monetize everything. They'll say, as if monetization is a character flaw. They wrap scarcity in virtue. If someone else earns, they soften that envy into a critique. They sold out. That sentence is a shield. It disguises the louder, scarier thought. If I sell this and it fails, I will be exposed as less than I imagined. So the plan stays secret, safe from the possibility of being seen as small. But the secret has costs. The most obvious is missed feedback. No market, no customer, no critique. No pressure to actualize. A plan left to rot in a folder never learns. It never adapts. It remains an ideal. The person who hides becomes a curator of potential instead of a builder of real things. Let me give you a concrete scene. A woman I worked with had a polished idea for an online coaching program. Brilliant on paper. She created modules, an email funnel, mock-ups. She told 2 friends only. Months passed. She told herself the platform needed one more refinement. She told herself it would go live next month for 6 months. Then she met someone speaking at a conference who described a program eerily similar to hers. She smiled, felt the hollow pain of recognition, and left without making a move. The world did not steal her idea. She gave it away by hiding it. That story is not rare. It repeats. Sometimes the person never speaks their idea aloud until it is too late. The emotional charge becomes a slow, aching pressure in the chest. Years later, they find themselves in a room listening to someone else recount the very vision they never allowed to breathe. Then the cycle sharpens. They withdraw further. They rationalize vindication. Good. They had to learn that the world will take anything. But the truth is harsher. They surrendered the chance to test reality because they feared importuning it. I see the same architecture when money arrives, not as opportunity, but as accusation. A man gets an unexpected client. He feels panicked. He calculates the risk of his deliverable being exposed as imperfect. He underprices to hide incompetence. He avoids speaking of the new client. He does not use the win to expand. His shame turns success into a secret token. A secret token does nothing for momentum. It feeds the inner story. I must stay small so I don't reveal the truth. Soon, no clients appear. The one win becomes a memory. What the person wants to believe is keeping things private preserves them from negative energy. What they rarely acknowledge is the energy they preserve most of all, their fear. Fear is a sticky thing. It collects other fears and dresses them in virtue. That is how protection becomes prison. Now, let's dissect the internal language people use to make this acceptable. There are 3 repeating lines I hear again and again. 1. It's not the right time. 2. I need to finalize the structure. 3. If I speak of it, someone will copy me or I will invite negative vibes. Each line is a polite evasion. Each one buys time. Each one moves the moment of accountability further into the fog. Inside those lines live automatic thoughts. Thought, I am not ready. Thought, others will judge me incompetent. Thought, if I try and fail, that failure will define me. These thoughts produce emotions, anxiety, shame, the urge to hide. Emotions then create behaviors, secrecy, over-preparation, endless perfectionism. Behavior produces results, stagnation, no traction. Results feed interpretation. See, better to keep it private. The loop reinforces itself. This loop exists in relationships too. People hide personal changes. They plan a move, a breakup, a career shift. But they do not say the dates. They do not name the cost. Without accountability, the plan remains theory. Without exposure, the plan loses traction. I have seen couples where one partner secretly wants to change careers. They rehearse in bed at night, but fear the ridicule of family. So they remain in the same job, their energy dissipating into fantasy. Years later, they resent those who risked and moved. There is an invisible economy here. When you commit publicly, you gain momentum through friction. Friction forces clarity. When you hide, you remove helpful friction and keep only the friction of fear. The universe is not a spectator. Systems respond to commitment. People respond to deadlines. Opportunities arrive when you enter the field visibly. That visibility creates obligations and invites resources. Concealment avoids obligations and starves the plan of allies. And yet I want to be precise. I'm not saying to shout every private thought to the world. Discretion matters. I'm saying that secrecy used as a default defense is lethal. There is a difference between selective sharing and chronic hiding. Selective sharing is a chosen tool. Chronic hiding is a pattern that protects fear. Let me pull you into a day in the life diagnosis of this profile. Wake up. A bright idea forms before coffee. You smile to yourself and tuck it away. Mid-morning, you open your notes, polish the concept. Lunch, you research competitors. Afternoon, you make 5 more revisions. Evening, You tell a friend you are. Here is the uncomfortable truth. The world does not bless secrecy. The world returns to you what you habitually emit. When you habitually emit secrecy, the world responds with secrecy in return. Invisible opportunities, unclaimed recognition, quiet regret. Now a small interruption. If you're finding this useful and you want more honest, practical analysis like this, subscribe and help the channel reach 1,000 subscribers. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments, city and country. It helps me direct these mensajes in a way that actually reaches people. Thank you for staying with me. Back to the analysis. This type of mind constructs a three-layer defense. Layer 1 is rhetoric. Layer 2 is ritual. Layer 3 is avoidance. The rhetoric is the language, timing, energy, protection. The ritual is performed privately. Extra research, redoing drafts, creating idealized mock-ups. Avoidance is the actual behavior. Not launching, not committing, not naming. You can see how each layer supports the others. The rhetoric justifies the ritual. The ritual hides the avoidance. The avoidance preserves the rhetoric. It becomes a self-coaching system that never moves beyond cautious speculation. I want to name the cost in financial terms as well. People who hide plans rarely scale. They avoid partnerships because partnerships create shared visibility. They avoid investment because investment invites accountability. They avoid pricing their offers transparently because pricing commits them to deliver. So revenue plateaus. They live month to month on small wins or occasional consulting. Their net worth grows slowly, if at all. When money does come, they treat it as a secret trophy rather than capital to reinvest. That behavior stalls growth for years. I have worked with someone who had 3 private funnels that never launched publicly. Each funnel represented months of work. Each had potential customers already sketched out. When I asked why they kept relaunching the idea privately, they said, "I need it to be perfect." Perfection kept them poor. Perfection was a strategy of avoidance. It felt noble, but it was cowardly. There is a cultural angle here too. In certain circles, secrecy is celebrated as depth. Being open about your plans is seen as bragging. That cultural lens makes it harder to distinguish healthy discretion from fearful concealment. But the test is results. Does secrecy produce a visible life of completed projects, stable income, and meaningful relationships? If not, the posture is likely a camouflage. Observe how these people interpret external feedback. If someone says, "Why didn't you launch?" they have an automatic excuse. "I wanted to make sure the timing was right." They interpret feedback as pressure that proves their original fear. This makes them defensive. They tighten the shield. They cut themselves off from allies who might have helped. Allies are crucial because allies provide reality checks. Allies ask the painful but necessary question, "When will you do this?" Allies require progress. That pressure is productive because it forces decisions. Secrecy avoids productive pressure. I sometimes ask people to say aloud, "If I launch and fail, I will survive." It is simple. Most cannot say it with conviction. They have never practiced the idea of surviving failure. They have practiced avoiding it. The survival imagination is a muscle. It grows when exercised. Secrecy is the ultimate anti-exercise. There is a deeper emotional tempo here, which I will name. It is the tempo of shame. Shame tells you that your failure will be a character stain. Shame reduces your identity to a single event. The person who hides is protecting against shame. Shame thrives in secrecy. The paradox: secrecy manufactures the very shame it aims to prevent because every untested plan becomes a silent accusation. Over time, the chest fills with the weight of all those small, untried things. That weight becomes a chronic ache. It shows up as low-grade resentment and a feeling that life is almost. Almost is a slow poison of potential. If you are hearing this and feeling a lurch of recognition, say to yourself now, "I may have hidden plans, and I choose to stop hiding one of them." Say it slowly. You don't need to announce it to the world yet. but say it out loud to one person you trust. This small behavioral step begins changing the internal wiring. Your voice outside is a force averse to hiding. Finally, before I move to the next section, understand that this profile is not static. People can shift. They move from secrecy to selective risk. They can learn to use exposure as a tool instead of a threat. In the next part 1, we'll break down the common internal subtypes I see within this pattern. Each one dresses fear in different garments. Some look harmless. Some are toxic. If you want to know which one you are, keep listening. I will name them plainly and show their daily lives. Which one are you? You might be more than one. Now I will unmask the internal varieties of this pattern. The shell is the same. The content inside differs. I group the people I see into 4 portraits. Each portrait has its own posture, rituals, and damage. I will describe each as if I followed one through a day. You will hear the voice of the person and the private story that runs them. I want you to see your reflection sharp and painful. It is only then that you can choose differently. The first portrait I call the defensive mystic. They present secrecy as spiritual discipline. They believe words have power in a literal sense. They will say, "If I speak it, I invite negative forces." They use prayer, ritual, and intention setting as armor. Their timeline is cyclical. They will prepare a plan, perform a ritual, wait for a sign, reinterpret the sign to mean not yet. The ritual is soothing. It gives moral cover to delay. A day with the defensive mystic starts with a careful meditation. They align energy, cleanse, read intuitive passages, consult a ritual calendar. They journal their intentions, but stop short of declaring dates. At breakfast, they rehearse what they will say if asked. At noon, they glance at their notes and whisper a protection invocation. In the afternoon, they attend a workshop on subtle energies and leave reassured they did the inner work. They feel morally superior to an entrepreneur who pushes and forces outcomes. In the evening, they may imagine launching. Then they tell themselves the atmosphere is wrong and return to ritual. The core belief is, visible talk attracts harmful attention. The private story is, if people knew my plan, they would break it, steal it, or laugh at me. The consequence is stagnation. The world, to them, becomes a place of predators. They withdraw. They protect the idea to death. Ironically, the rituals they perform to preserve energy also preserve inertia. The price paid is time, missed connections, and professional isolation. If you are the defensive mystic, you must ask, are your rituals inviting allies or isolating you? A ritual that prepares you for action should precede action, not replace it. Try this small experiment. Pick one ritual you trust. After you perform it, declare the next physical step aloud to one supportive person. Make that step non-negotiable. The ritual will still be sacred, but now it will be a bridge to movement. The second portrait is the paralyzed perfectionist. They are the champions of endless preparation. Their desk is a temple of multiple drafts. They believe that if the plan is imperfect, it exposes them as incompetent. Perfection is a safety vest. They rewrite, rework, reframe, and in the process they never land. A typical day for this type starts with checking last night's edits. They revise slides, tweak copy, improve designs. Midday they run new metrics and adjust the funnel. Afternoon brings another round of edits. They say things like, "I need one more proofing round." They are capable people. They could ship, but they judge every version by an impossible standard. The belief beneath is simple. If people see the mess, they will stop believing in me. The consequence is that no one gets a chance to believe in them at all. The paralyzed perfectionist often hides under competence. They produce evidence of work, but not results. They hold many half-complete projects that look impressive in a folder. Financially, they sacrifice momentum for the appearance of professionalism. They will wait for the perfect offer and miss market windows. Their life is a parade of almosts. Their private shame grows when a less polished competitor launches and succeeds. The perfectionist then uses that success as proof that the world values execution over beauty. But the truth is they had a choice to execute. When offered a raise or an opportunity, they suspect strings of ridicule hidden behind smiles. They withdraw, preferring the safety of anonymity. Over time, their confidence erodes. Opportunities that required visibility vanish. They feel cheated by the world and create narratives of conspiracy. But the reality is simpler. They protected themselves from social pain and, in doing so, forfeited the validation and resources that come from exposure. If you recognize this scar, begin to rewrite the memory. Create a micro-exposure challenge. Tell a trusted friend one small plan. Watch what happens. It is often not the catastrophic ridicule you fear. Enlist a coach or ally who is firmly encouraging. Practice being seen in controlled conditions. Healing is not denial. It is rebuilding trust with others. The fourth and last portrait is the dreamer without commitment. This person loves the sensation of possibility more than the labor of execution. They prefer keeping plans as private pleasures. Imagining is sensual. Doing is boring. They promise themselves that they will reveal things when the time is right, and the time never arrives because the plan is pleasurable as an interior movie. A day with the dreamer starts with morning fantasies. They sketch dream boards, collect inspiration, move from concept to concept. They tell themselves they will pick one when they feel ready. They never establish deadlines. They might enroll in courses and buy tools. They may even build beautiful prototypes that never get tested. Their private script is, life is about possibilities, not obligations. The consequence is a life of surface pleasures and little legacy. Financially, the dreamer invests time and money in ideas, but never in launch costs or promotional efforts that demand durability. Their friends admire their imagination. They are often liked, but they are not reliable as partners in business or relationships. They retain the excitement of planning while losing the credibility of finishers. If you are the dreamer, your task is to practice small, boring discipline. Choose one idea and assign a visible deadline. Make a public tiny offer. The completion will be less glamorous than your fantasy, but it will recruit reality to your side. That is the trade, glamour for gravity. These portraits are different faces of the same mechanism. They share a skeleton, fear disguised as protective wisdom. Their rituals differ, their stories vary, but the outcome converges. They slow the flow of resources, relationships, and recognition. There is one more point to make before I stitch these portraits together. Most people I see do not belong exclusively to one portrait. They migrate. In their 20s, they may be ridicule-scarred. In their 30s, a perfectionist. Later, they may adopt a mystic stance to justify new delays. Your profile shifts with age, with wounds, with success and failure. Recognizing the fluidity is liberating. It allows you to name the pattern in the moment and choose an alternative behavior. So what ties them all? Two things. 1. A private story that equates exposure with annihilation. 2. A behavior of withdrawal or performance that prevents corrective feedback. Both combined create an engine that runs on fear and manufactures evidence for itself. The world then responds coherently to the dominant frequency. It matches secrecy with scarcity. I want to give you two short life case sketches that show transformation, because seeing the exit is necessary to believe in it. The first is a client I will call Maya. Maya was a perfectionist who guarded every course module. She revised for 9 months. I asked her to set a deadline and tell one colleague. She did. The colleague checked in. The accountability forced her to ship. The first launch was rough. Sales were modest. She iterated. By month 6, she had a stable offering and a small audience. She admitted later that the exposure was terrifying, but it taught her to correct, to price, to communicate. She made more money in a year than in 3 prior years of private polishing. She said, "I thought perfection would protect me. It almost killed my business." The second is Tomas. Tomas was ridicule-scarred. He avoided public recognition because of childhood mockery. He started a blog under his name and published one honest post a week for 6 months. He did it for a small circle at first. A strategist shared one of his essays and it reached a client who hired him. The money and recognition rebuilt a small trust inside him. He said, "Once I proved to myself I could be seen and survive, I stopped hiding." That phrase, "stop hiding," is the hinge. Both cases show a subtle but radical truth. Exposure is not a tax on safety. It is the currency of possibility. When you expose a plan, you invite correction and resources. You also invite the risk of failure. But failure, when survived, becomes evidence that you can survive. That evidence dissolves shame's power. If you are listening and thinking, "Which portrait am I?" take a moment. Say the name aloud that fits closest: defensive mystic, paralyzed perfectionist, ridicule-scarred, or dreamer without commitment. Saying the name breaks the spell. It moves you from being a passive subject of the pattern to someone who can take deliberate action. Before I close this section, there is one last danger I must name. Some people use these profiles to self-diagnose and then hide inside the diagnosis. They say, "I'm a perfectionist. What can I do?" and leave it there. Naming is not the end point. It is the starting line. The real work is to create micro-behaviors that contradict the old scripts. Name the pattern and then refuse it through small public acts. Now, with these portraits clear, you can see multiple exit routes. Some require therapy, some require accountability partners, some require public deadlines. In the next part, I will show the exact invisible law that binds all these portraits together. It's the mechanism that makes secrecy return scarcity. If you want to understand why the universe responds to your patterns so predictably, stay with me. I will explain the law and why it is not punishment, but literal coherence. I call it the law of avoided commitment. I name it plainly because when you don't name the thing, it keeps running in the background like a ghost machine. I've watched this law operate the same way across rooms, offices, and dinner tables. It is simple, brutal, and perfectly obedient to the signals you give it. At first it sounds like an idea about prudence. "I'm protecting energy," someone will say. That sounds noble. It sounds like a principle. But there is a technical mechanics under that sentence. The mechanics run like code inside your nervous system. You hide a plan. Your nervous system interprets that hiding. It marks the plan as fragile. It files the plan as not for the world. That filing changes everything. The law is not mystical. It is a mapping of how mind, posture, and reality interact. When you withhold, you send 3 messages at once. Message 1, the idea is not fully backed by me. Message 2, if it fails, I will not own it publicly. Message 3, I prefer safety over exposure. Your subconscious understands those signals. It shifts your body, voice, and choices to match the private message. You become an actor rehearsing precaution instead of a person moving toward results. Concretely, that shift shows up in micro-actions. You tighten your language. You stop using numbers. You say someday instead of a date. You volunteer other people's successes as cautionary tales. When money arrives, you do not reinvest. You cash out quietly and hide the gain. If a client calls, you underprice or say little about the work. Each small move is consistent with the initial private signal. This plan is not robust enough to survive public scrutiny. I want to make visible the internal flow. It looks like this in a moment. Stimulus, a new idea, immediate evaluation, private fear registers action, choices narrow, the plan is shelved. Do that enough times, and the nervous system learns to anticipate the fear. The fear becomes the default. The mind evolves habits that serve avoidance. You train your brain to prefer safety over expression. Let me show you a typical cascade with a scene. A woman drafts a program on Saturday morning. She writes the modules. She records a prototype lesson that evening. She opens the laptop the next day and feels a small pulse of dread in her throat when she imagines emailing a friend about it. She tells herself, timing. She reopens slides, and edits the third module for 3 weeks. Every edit is an emotional buffer. The edits are rituals of safety. They feel meaningful. They feel productive. But the program never finds a customer. The nervous, you become fluent in sentences that grant moral status to hiding. Energy becomes a word you use to sanctify delay. Timing becomes a cloak for procrastination. Protection becomes a philosophy. I have heard these sentences dozens of times, and they always do the same job. They convert fear into virtue. This law also operates in social systems. If you habitually protect ideas from critique, your social network will mirror that posture. Colleagues will not ask you for updates. Friends will not check in on deadlines. The network learns you are not a person who invites accountability. That absence of accountability is part of the law's force. It removes external constraints that would otherwise produce movement. There is a physical signature to this law. Pay attention to posture. When someone is committed, they speak with specificity. They name dates, numbers, and deliverables. Their shoulders are forward. When someone is avoiding, their language is abstract. They use passive verbs. Their gestures retract. The body tells the truth before the mind finishes editing it. The law of avoided commitment writes itself into gesture and tone. Let me show you how the universe, which I treat as a mirror system rather than a judge, reads this sign. You announce a plan publicly even to one trusted person, and the environment responds with friction. That friction is useful. A technical error appears, a logistics problem shows up, a necessary skill emerges. Each friction point is an invitation to grow. If you never show the plan, you never see the frictions. You never learn to solve them. So the law functions like a thermostat. Hide, get sheltered from friction, but also sheltered from growth. There are costs that go beyond missed opportunities. There is an emotional tax. Each hidden idea accumulates weight inside your chest. It is a private ledger of untested potential that becomes a slow ache. Shame breeds in the ledger's margins. Shame tells a story. I am less than I say I could be. Shame multiplies by secrecy. The law of avoided commitment becomes not just a professional handicap, but a moral pressure that reshapes identity. I have seen clever people reinterpret failure as validation for secrecy. When someone else launches and fails, the hidden person says, "See, I was right not to expose it." But that interpretation is a mirror turned inward that always shows the concealer of fear a flattering image. The law feeds this loop by offering immediate psychic comfort. Better to be unexposed than exposed, and possibly small. The comfort is seductive. It is also lethal to momentum. Understanding the law means you can track its fingerprints. Look for these signals: chronic editing, vague timelines, secrecy about money, repeated phrases invoking purity or protection, underpricing wins, and celebrating intentions more than outcomes. Each is a node in the same network. The law wires them into a coherent system. Naming those nodes dismantles some of the glamour around the habit. Naming the law is not enough. That's the subtlety. Understanding the law of avoided commitment makes the problem visible, but people can become enamored with clarity and then do nothing. Awareness without action is still a form of hiding. The real test is behavioral. Do you publicly declare one small measurable thing within the next week? The law does not react to insight. It reacts to changed energy. You must produce a different posture and then preserve it long enough for reality to respond. So what does a corrective posture look like? It is not reckless exposure. It is intentional declaration. Start small. Announce one deliverable with a date to one accountable person. Price something publicly for a narrow market. Make the risk visible. That risk is not a moral deficit. It is the engine you've been trying to avoid. It converts thought into transaction and learning. I will show how this pattern cycles into self-sabotage in the next section. I will show the loops spinning across money, relationships, and time. I will show the exact predictable steps that take an idea into a graveside of drafts and revised mock-ups. If you want to see how the law of avoided commitment moves from an idea to ruin, Stay with me. The mechanism is mechanical and merciless, and only by seeing its gears can you pry them open. What happens when the cycle runs its course? That is where the next part begins. And it is where most people wake up or break. The cycle I watch is not poetic. It is procedural. There are 4 steps, and they recur like a machine. They are simple to name and brutal in effect. Step 1, conception. Step 2, private fear. Step 3, concealment. Step 4, stagnation. Then the loop repeats, each time a little deeper, a little louder under the ribs. Conception feels electric. You wake with an idea. It lights up a Sunday. You sketch a page, record a voice note, imagine the finish line. The initial feeling is bright. It is why many of these people are charming. The idea phase is their playground. They own possibility like a private garden. The second step follows fast. A small thought pulls the brightness into shadow. You imagine someone laughing, or you imagine a competitor beating you, or you imagine your work being judged as less than. That thought is quick and efficient. It produces an emotion: shame, anxiety, dread, and these emotions feel like signals to protect. You feel the throat tighten and your plans recoil. The third step is where strategy is invented to justify avoidance. You become a litigator for safety. You say timing, energy, not ready, sacred, or prudent. You do preparation as protection. You rework funnels, redesign slides, research competitors, learn a new software. The preparation is endless because perfection is the perfect escape hatch. It promises that next time will be proof against shame. The fourth step is the result. The plan remains unrealized. Without exposure, there is no pressure to adapt. The plan is a museum exhibit. It will be beautiful to you, and only you, until you either die or change your method. The stagnation feeds the private story, better safe than sorry. That story then reinforces the initial fear. The loop is closed. Now let me show this cycle in 3 different lives so you can see its industrial strength across contexts. First, the entrepreneur who never launches. She is good at systems. She has a spreadsheet that maps content, pricing tiers, funnels, and partnerships. On Tuesday, she records video modules. On Thursday, she finds a layout inconsistency in Module 3 and rewrites 10 slides. Each week, she attends webinars promising scalability. She buys tools. She invests in photography. Time passes and her launch date is always next month. A peer launches a lean version and gets 20 clients. The perfectionist's private ledger gets heavier. She tells herself the others succeeded because they moved, not because they were less refined. The loop looks like this. Idea, dread of critique, rework until it is perfect, no customers, proof to avoid exposure. The longer she keeps this pattern, the more talent becomes a currency she hoards and never spends. Second, the money scenario. A man maps an investment strategy in January. He calculates risk tolerances and asset allocations. He feels clever. Then an opportunity arrives. He can invest $10K with a trusted partner who will hold him accountable. He feels an old shame. Previously he trusted and lost money. He says he wants to wait for clarity. Months pass. The market moves. The partner invests elsewhere, and the man tells himself he saved from risk. But the truth is he saved from accountability. The financial loop is planned fear of risk and public failure, avoidance of joint commitment, missed compound growth and discipline. Slight wins that would have trained trust become anonymous regrets. Third, the intimate life. A person vows to change health habits. They imagine the new body and how they will feel. When they think of telling friends, a flash memory visits. You always quit. The person goes into ritual. They research diets, buy supplements, test a new app. They count calories in private for a week and feel proud. Then the app subscription expires. The intention dissolves. Without a check-in from a friend or trainer, the habits never harden. The loop functions. Idea, fear of public shame, private ritual, no durable change. Across each context, the same mechanism operates. The mind produces a narrative to justify safety. The narrative buys time. Time becomes inertia. Each untested plan is evidence for the narrative. That evidence feeds the emotion that started it. The machine is it reduces the pain you might otherwise feel from inaction. You receive enough validation to soothe shame, but not enough to produce outcomes. The system cheats itself. You appear admired at the level of possibility, but you never get the harder currency real results. I want to be precise about the reinforcement. Each time you hide, and the plan fails to launch, the brain takes a sample of data. I hid it. Nothing bad happened. So hiding protected me. The brain stores this as a successful avoidance. It does not weigh the cost of unrealized potential. Avoidance gets rewarded by the immediate relief it produces. The future cost fewer wins, lower income, stunted relationships is discounted because it is temporally distant. The loop is effective because it trades long-term value for short-term relief. There are predictable upgrade moves within the loop. People escalate the sophistication of their avoidance. They move from private drafts to private funnels. They create multiple versions inside a folder named Launch Do Not Open. They simulate the external world through private testing groups that never publish. This pseudo-exposure is a trick. It feels like practice, but it keeps the plan within a safety radius that never experiences true friction. At this point, many listeners think, but what about those people who do go public and fail? Aren't they punished? The answer is yes, sometimes. Public failure can feel ugly, but the reality I have seen is the opposite. Public failure often shortens the loop. It produces immediate feedback. It forces repair. It yields allies, funds, corrections. The avoidance loop creates a slow and chronic deprivation. A messy public failure is often the fastest way out of that deprivation. This entire cycle will not self-correct. It accelerates. Each turn makes the next turn easier. That is why the moment to intervene is as early as possible. Intervene before the second or third stall becomes a habit. Intervene while your nervous system still believes possible success is a viable outcome. So what does intervention look like in the middle of the cycle? It is surgical. It is a single public act that creates a constraint. For some people, it is pricing a product. For others, it is telling one trusted person a firm date. For another, it is posting a first draft and asking for critique. The goal is to introduce external friction where previously there was only private comfort. The next part will show what happens when the cycle runs out of patience, the collapse point. It is a slow suffocation that becomes sudden in perception. People reach moments where the weight of all the secret plans becomes visible. Some harden into bitterness. Others use the shock to pivot. I will describe the anatomy of that collapse and the choices it offers. Where people go at that hinge is the measure of whether their life continues in halting almosts or starts to produce real completions. You'll want to hear the stories of those who hit the bottom and found the threshold to climb. That is where I take you next. The collapse rarely arrives like a lightning strike. It accumulates like sediment. Years of next months pile up. Files multiply. Drafts thicken. The chest becomes heavier in a way that is not merely emotional. It is structural. People start to recognize a pattern of loss that is oddly quiet. They have not been robbed by others. They have been robbed by their own counsel to hide. I have sat with people the hour after they wake up to the realization. It looks like this: a networking dinner where someone else describes a business you once sketched. The words land like a physical blow. You smile. You clap. But inside something breaks. The recognition is sharp. That idea was yours once in potential, and now it lives outside you because you would not risk exposure. The experience is near physical pain. It is grief for a self you never produced. The collapse sometimes shows as a financial junction. A person who secreted their business never scaled. Their bank account ekes out. Opportunities that required visibility, investment, partnerships, steady clients disappear. The person cannot point to a single project that transformed their life. Instead, they hold a portfolio of potentials that do not pay. Over time, this produces not only frustration, but a quiet self-narrative of incompetence. The inner voice moves from protective to punitive. There is also a moral collapse. People who once wore secrecy as moral armor begin to feel the hollowness in that morality. The spiritual language that once soothed now feels like an excuse. They notice that their virtue of not monetizing everything sits next to months where bills were late. The cognitive dissonance accelerates the collapse. It is hard to keep believing in an untested doctrine when reality demands rent. I can give you 2 concrete exits from collapse because I have seen them often. One exit is the hardening into bitterness. People double down on secrecy and begin to cultivate narratives of theft. They stole my idea becomes a mantra. The world becomes a predator. The person becomes more secretive and angrier. They often rationalize more extreme behaviors. That passage is corrosive. It creates enemies where allies could have existed. It is a long descent into isolation. The second exit is a moment of lucid shame that becomes a lever. Shame is uncomfortable, but it can be instructive. Some people, after the sharp recognition, admit aloud, "I hid that because I was afraid to be small." Saying it publicly unhooks a part of the mechanism. The admission is valuable because it transfers private weight into public clarity. Once a plan is acknowledged as hidden out of fear, it loses some of its power. The person who admits begins to practice small exposures. Let me tell you about Maya. She was a perfectionist in the way I described earlier. 9 months of revising, no launch. The hour of collapse for her was at a conference where she watched a speaker deliver a program not unlike hers. The discomfort was severe enough that she booked a coaching call with me the next morning. She did one thing differently. She set a hard deadline and told one colleague the date. She committed in public at a small scale. The first launch was messy. Sales were modest. But she learned to price, to communicate, to iterate. Within a year, she had something sustainable. The collapse for Maya created a pivot because she chose exposure over further hiding. Tomas is different. He carried ridicule from adolescence. The collapse came when his friend's blog took off with almost the exact voice Tomas had rehearsed privately for years. Tomas felt gutted. He started a weekly post series under his name and published relentlessly. At first it was terrifying. Then one post was shared. One client reached out. The money was small, but the credibility returned in proportion. He described it as practicing survival. That practice retrained his nervous system to believe failure is survivable. Both exits share one thing: a decision to convert internal fear into external accountability. The change is not mystical. It is not a sudden confidence. It is a disciplined sequence of small acts that make possible what was previously taboo: public trial. The collapse also has a social arithmetic. When you accumulate secret plans, you are also accumulating unpaid favors and unmet obligations to others who might have helped. Your network, when finally told, often responds with empathy and resources. People prefer to help someone who asks. The collapse, if confronted, can recruit allies because it reveals human need. The person who keeps hiding does not recruit help. They drift. I want to be blunt about the cost of staying in the collapse. It is not dramatic in the cinematic sense. It is slow humiliation. You will feel lower-grade regret in moments it is easy to ignore scrolling your feed, at reunions, when you read newsletters from people your age who shipped, or when you pay a bill that feels heavier than it should. Over time, those small regrets calcify into a narrative that defines your identity if you let them. I am the person who has ideas but never finishes becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Yet the collapse is also a site of possibility precisely because everything that protects the pattern has been emptied. The person has less to lose in the usual ways. Pride is cracked. Secrets are already known by the self. This humility can be fertile. The right move at the collapse is not theatrical. It is simple and methodical. Choose one plan, reduce its scope until it can be delivered in public in 30 days, pick one accountable person, and iterate. The key is to create a sequence of small, visible proof points that the nervous system can record as survivable. There is a technical reason this works. Your brain learns through reinforcement. If you expose and survive, your fear memory weakens. You build a new memory you exposed. You learned the cure must involve visibility and constraint. So what is the hinge? The hinge is a sentence you must be able to say out loud to one person. I will do X by Y date, and I want you to check on me. The complexity of X and Y is irrelevant. The moral force is the act of asking to be held accountable. That single move ruptures the law. It creates a new circuit in the nervous system. Public commitment, friction, learning, momentum. Momentum is the opposite of secrecy. In the next part, I will show precisely how to reprogram that circuit. I will give the micro rituals that reshape thought into habit. I will explain how to structure declarations so that they invite the right kind of friction, not destructive pressure. If you are standing at the collapse, the next section is the practical map out of it. It is not soft. It is a set of small, repeatable behaviors that literally change the trajectory of your life. The question is simple. Will you take the first small public step? If yes, listen to what I will give you next. If no, at least know how the collapse continues. The choice is yours. I call the new pattern exposed commitment. It is not clever. It is not mystical. It is the simplest countermeasure I have found against a lifetime of secret plans that never leave the drawer. Exposed commitment reverses the logic that kept you protected. It says, if secrecy is the exit, exposure is the entrance. If your mind built a shelter out of silence, you must build a door. This is practical. It starts with a posture and then moves to practice. The posture is a refusal to let avoidance masquerade as prudence. The posture is saying aloud, at small scale, what you would otherwise whisper to yourself. The practice is a ritual I have used with dozens of clients who were stuck for years. It is low drama and high friction. It is not about bravado. It is about creating predictable consequences for your inertia. I call the practice the three-stage declaration. It is a micro-ritual. It is a map of small exposures that force your nervous system to record survivable outcomes. The three-stage declaration is built to be repeatable and boring. That boringness is the point. Change happens in repetition, not in spectacle. Stage 1 is the written edge. You choose one plan you have been hiding. You write it down in detail. Not a wish. Not a mood. Concrete. What you will deliver, for whom, the cost, the date, and one obvious metric of success. I ask people to imagine they will read this line to an investor or a client. The sentence must be simple and precise. Write it as you would sign a contract with yourself. That act of writing changes the neural status of the plan. It moves it from maybe into defined. Stage 2 is the trusted check. You identify one person who will hold you accountable. Preferably someone you respect, but who will not coddle you. You tell them your plan and your deadline. You ask them to check in on specific dates. You also give them permission to be blunt. This step introduces social friction. Friction is a form of kindness here. The goal is not to create shame. The goal is to create consequence. The trusted check makes your plan visible to at least one other set of eyes. Stage 3 is the public poke. You make a small public signal about the plan. Not a full launch. A poke. An email to a small list. A social post that says, I'm testing X by Y date. The poke is calibrated so you can survive the outcome. It invites reality in without asking for perfection. It creates a field of tension. That tension produces useful feedback. Those 3 stages are the frame. Each stage has a discipline attached. For the written edge, the discipline is ruthless specificity. Write 1 page only. Do not rewrite forever. 1 draft, 1 deadline to stop editing. For the trusted check, the discipline is scheduling the check and immediately set the calendar invite then and there. For the public poke, the discipline is keeping the announcement simple and measurable. People resist these steps for reasons we already know. They say, I'm not ready, or I can't deal with negative energy. Those are code phrases. They translate to, I'm terrified of being small in public. The ritual exposes that fear as a fear, not as a cosmic law. Naming fear deprives it of authority. There is a neurological logic behind this. Secrecy allows your limbic system to reward avoidance. Secrecy produces a quick hit, relief. You avoid potential shame. You breathe, and your body says, good decision. The new pattern changes the reward structure. Exposure produces discomfort at first. It triggers the same limbic alarm that secrecy shut off. But then something different can happen. When you expose and you survive, the brain logs a new memory. I exposed, I survived, I learned. That new memory gradually weakens the old reflexive pathway that equated exposure with catastrophe. I want to give you an exact script you can use in these first days. It is ugly and honest and useful. For the written edge, write a single sentence that contains these elements. What you will deliver plus who will receive it plus a date. For the trusted check, say to your chosen person, I will do X by Y. Will you ask me about it on Z? For the public poke, pick one platform and say, I will test X by Y. If you want to follow this, I'll share updates. Do not add qualifiers. Do not hedge. The hedges are where the loop squeezes back in. This ritual is intentionally small. Small because most of you will respond to anything too large by retreating to perfection. Small because the nervous system learns in baby steps. Small because a string of small survivals accumulates faster than a single heroic leap. Each small survival builds a new muscle. Now let me show you how exposure stops being naive and becomes strategic. Exposure has to be framed as constraint. When you make a public promise, you do not do it to invite cheerleaders. You do it to create constraint. Constraint is a force that simplifies decision-making. The more constraints you introduce, the fewer escape routes you have. A deadline that is public is a constraint. A price that you publish is a constraint. A simple product offering no options, no maybe tears, is a constraint. Constraint reduces anxiety by focusing choice. It takes the infinite space of maybe tomorrow and narrows it to do or explain. Humans are terrible at infinite choice. We produce paralysis when possibilities proliferate without pressure. Constraint restores the useful pressure. I have seen this pattern misused. Some people explode into reckless exposure. They shout promises they cannot keep. They oversell what they do not yet have. That is not what I instruct. Reckless exposure can re-traumatize you. It can validate your fear by producing a public failure that is hard to repair. The answer is calibrated exposure, visible, but manageable. Calibration matters in two variables, scale and friction. Scale is how many people you include in your public poke. Start small. Friction is how likely it is that the promise will be tested. The trusted check supplies friction. The public poke supplies additional friction. Combine them so that exposure is likely but not catastrophic. People ask me how long to run this ritual before they increase the stakes. My answer is simple. Run it until your survival memory outweighs your avoidance memory. Practically, that often looks like 4 to 8 cycles. That is not an arbitrary number. It is the time it typically takes to document repeatable evidence for the brain that exposure equals learning, not annihilation. I want you to imagine two trajectories. In the old trajectory, you keep perfecting, buying tools, closing drafts. Each week you feel like you made progress because you worked on the plan. But the balance sheet stays the same. In the new trajectory, you do one written edge, you invite one trusted check, and you make one public poke. You collect the feedback, adjust, repeat. The first months are messy. The first month is humiliating. The second month is instructive. The third month feels like competence emerging through trial. Let me be clear about what I will not ask you to do. I will not ask you to post a finished product you know is harmful. I will not ask you to manufacture fake progress. I will ask you to stop using not ready as a moral stance. I will ask you to treat exposure as neutral, not as a threat. That mental move is deeper than any tactic. You must be willing to observe your fear without consenting to it. Now some concrete cautions. Do not choose accountability partners who conflate kindness with avoidance. Some people are nice and then never call you on deadlines. That is collusion with your pattern. Do not choose partners who weaponize shame. That will only re-traumatize. Pick someone who is compassionate and clear. Schedule a check-in. I asked her to do the 3-stage declaration on a micro-product, one 30-minute workshop by a specific date. She wrote the sentence. She told a colleague. She posted a small announcement to 40 people. The workshop had 3 paying participants. It was imperfect. It was short. But Maya learned pricing, marketing, and delivery under pressure. She learned to adjust her deck in public. The next launch had 12 paying clients. The next had 40. That accumulation did not happen because she finally got inspired. It happened because she replaced secrecy with simple exposes and learned in public. Another client, Tomas, carried adolescent ridicule like a scar. He feared being laughed at above everything. His exposure began with a weekly essay he published under his name. He told 2 friends to check. He posted. The first week a friend left a supportive comment. The second week a client found his writing. Tomas did not become viral. He became credible. Credibility was the antidote to his fear of ridicule. Both of those stories share a fragile commonality. Small, visible acts that were repeated. The brain does the rest. If you are listening now and feel that old reflex tighten in your throat, do this with me. Name the exact plan you have been hiding. Say it aloud. Now write one sentence that includes what it is, who it is for, and a date. Stop editing. Send that sentence in a message to one person and ask for a single check-in. If you cannot even do that, notice the thoughts that stop you. Write them down. They are the old pattern. Seeing them is the first step to removing them. If you do this, you will not be suddenly fearless. You will instead become tolerably visible. You will begin to value feedback over imagined safety. That small reorientation is the kernel of the new pattern. This work is messy. It is not heroic. It is patient and surgical. And it is reversible. If a poke goes poorly, you repair and continue. That choice to repair in public instead of retreat changes the entire arithmetic of your life. It replaces private preservation with public learning. There is another layer I teach after the initial cycles. Once the 3-stage declaration becomes a habit, you scale the constraint. You create simple stakes connected to resources. Put a refundable deposit, accept a tiny percentage of payment, or book a venue and risk the cost. Money is a clean friction. When you attach money to the promise, you remove the luxury of endless editing. The first few monetary commitments should be small, intentionally low stakes, but real. They teach discipline. Finally, be precise about what you will celebrate. Exposure is not an all or nothing morality play. It is a sequence of measurable wins. Celebrate when you made a public poke. Celebrate when you received a useful critique. Celebrate when you adjusted the plan in response. These celebrations are not vanity. They are data points for the nervous system. They tip the scale from I live by fear to I learn by doing. If you follow this, the next part is simple but crucial. You must see how this new pattern begins to shape your environment. Exposure does not happen in a vacuum. When you expose, people respond. Not always kindly, not always usefully, but always honestly. That response is the next thing you must learn to read. I will show you how to interpret the responses and use them to build durable momentum. But first, you must commit to the small acts. Are you ready to try one now? The future I describe is not dramatic. It is incremental. The small exposures you make begin to rearrange the architecture of your days. You will notice tiny but consistent shifts. Those shifts compound. They change who notices you. They change the requests you receive. They change the shape of your calendar. The first set of changes is linguistic. You begin to speak with specificity. You stop saying someday and start saying June 15th. Your sentences shrink and harden. This matters because language creates a frame. When you declare dates and numbers, other people can meet you. When you float vague possibilities, others float away. The world responds to specificity. Then your meetings change. You will volunteer for deadlines you would have avoided. You will no longer orbit ideas without committing. At first, this will feel like imposture. You will think you are pretending to be someone decisive. That is fine. We learn competence by practicing it. Opportunities find you differently. People begin to treat you as a system. A neighbor who once only offered sympathy will now offer a connector. A client will propose a trial project because your timeline looks sensible. You will be introduced to people who assume that what you say has an end date. That's the funny part. The universe does not reward private brilliance. It rewards reliable signals. Financially, the effect is quiet but material. When you stop hoarding talent as a private consolation prize and start turning it into small offers, money flows with your newly public commitments. It will not be a tidal wave. It will be a sequence of small deposits that build your confidence. Those deposits pay for more visibility. The pattern is self-reinforcing. There is also a psychic change. Exposure trains your tolerance for imperfection. When your first imperfect product is received, you will survive. You may even be corrected constructively. That correction is data. It is the fastest route to improvement. When you stop protecting yourself from that data, you learn faster than those who only protect their ideas. But the future is not a smooth gradient. Old reflexes push back. The same mind that made your plans private will now manufacture reasons to re-secrete the new ones. You will notice the urge to reschedule a launch, to tweak a price again, to create a new, perfect version. Expect this. The only way forward is to name the urge and continue. The urge weakens when it is witnessed. Let me map 3 stages of the future I have watched manifest in people who adopt exposed commitment. I do this because people like maps. They like to know where they are on a route. Stage 1. The proof of attention months. This is early. You make your first visible offers. You get small responses. You learn to price and to accept feedback. Your nervous system begins collecting evidence that you can survive public failure. You will likely earn something modest. But the important currency is not money. It is attention that is specifically tied to a deliverable. Stage 2. The compounding quarter. You have run a few cycles. Your network starts to expect you to show up. You begin landing slightly larger commitments because trust is now a credential you can reveal. Your bank account becomes marginally healthier. The feedback loop becomes faster. Mistakes are cheaper because your systems for repair are in place. Stage 3. The reputation rhythm. This does not mean fame. It means you have a track record. People know what you do and when you do it. That knowledge opens doors that secrecy never will. You attract collaborators. Offers arrive with less friction because others now see you as someone who delivers. These stages are not guaranteed. They require repetition. They require humility. They require the stubbornness to continue despite initial clumsy outcomes. There will be people who will criticize. There will be opportunities that appear late. There will be times when you wonder if you are making the same mistakes as before. That is normal. The difference now is that you are collecting data you can act on. I want to tell you about Leah. She was an artist who loved the image of being underground. She wrapped secrecy in aesthetics and called it integrity. She feared commercializing her work. When she began exposed commitment, she chose a minimal test, publish one limited print run, and offer it at one gallery night. She wrote the written edge, she told 2 friends, and she announced a limited run of 10. The night came. 6 prints sold. The sales were small, but the conversations she had with buyers changed her. She learned to describe her creative process and her price with clarity. The sales paid her rent that month. More importantly, the exchange gave her language to talk about her work. She stopped hiding behind purity and started having economic agency. Then there is Omar. He was brilliant at spreadsheets and plans. He had kept a secret consultancy idea for 3 years. He feared losing the idea to someone else. He ran the 3-stage sequence with a micro offer, a 2-hour group session for business owners at a low price. He told a colleague and posted to a small list. 10 people signed up. He discovered that the session format forced him to refine his point of view quickly. He learned the most valuable lesson of all. The market will show you what it wants. He iterated. He now runs a modest consultancy that pays him consistently. The secret never paid him a cent. The future also shifts the social arithmetic. When you move from secrecy to public commitment, every 30 days you build a new data point that your nervous system uses to rewire fear. There is another instrument I recommend, the public repair. When a poke does not work, do not let the silence happen. Make a short public statement. What went wrong, what you learned, what you will do next. Public repair is an act of integrity. It models how to handle failure in a way that enlarges trust rather than diminishes it. The worst thing you can do after a failed poke is to withdraw. Withdrawal is what secrecy taught you. Repair is what exposure teaches you. You will also need rituals to protect yourself from punitive voices. Not all feedback is useful. Some is mean. Some is irrelevant. Learn to filter. Have 3 questions you ask about any feedback. Is this precise? Is it actionable? Does it come from someone who understands my target? If the answer is no, you may discard it. If yes, you will use it. This is not arrogance. It is stewardship of your attention. As you accumulate visible acts, your inner narrative alters. The line, "I always hide my plans," weakens because there is now evidence to the contrary. This is the psychological pivot. Beliefs change when you have contrary evidence. Your job is to manufacture that evidence through exposure. The future I am describing is neither linear nor guaranteed. It is conditional on action. If you stop doing the rituals, the old loop returns. Secret plans re-solidify. Comfort returns, and with it, the slow rot of unrealized potential. The choice is durable but continual. You cannot perform one public act and consider yourself cured. You must institutionalize exposure into your work life. At the same time, this future is merciful. It lets you start small. It permits repair. It rewards curiosity. It replaces the myth of perfect launch with the reality of iterative craft. If you accept that, the horizon changes. You will still have to manage fear. You will still have to fix mistakes. But you will also have evidence that you can survive. And survival is the building block of confidence. If you imagine this future and feel a mixture of hope and dread, you are where you need to be. That mixture is the engine of change. In the next part, I will close the loop. I will hold the mirror up to you and ask the direct questions that determine whether you move forward. I will give you a single micro step you can do in the next hour. The next step will not be dramatic. It will be exact. It will ask you to choose visibility once again. Are you willing to take it? We started with a pattern, idea, fear, concealment, stagnation. We ended with a practice, exposure, accountability, repair, momentum. The arc is simple to describe and stubborn to live. My task has been to give you a map and a handful of instruments you can use immediately. Now I will be blunt and brief. This is your mirror. If you hide your plans, you are not protecting them. You are starving them. You are saving them from the world the way someone might save food in a locked pantry until it rots. That is the moral truth. It is not meant to shame. It is meant to wake you. Ask yourself 3 questions and answer them honestly. Do not rationalize. Do not narrate yourself into neatness. These questions are small and decisive. Question 1. When was the last time I told one person a plan with a date and actually followed through? If you cannot remember, that memory gap is telling. The habit of non-commitment is older than any single project. It has logic and momentum. Question 2. What was my last public repair? If you have never had to repair in public, you have never practiced recovery. Repair is the skill that stops failure from becoming identity. Question 3. Who is the person I can trust to ask me about progress and also refuse to validate my evasion? Name that person. If you cannot, you must find one. These questions are not rhetorical. They are operational. Answer them now, in writing, for yourself. Do not post them. Do not perform them. Do the private work of truth. Once you have your honest answers, do one small thing before the end of the day. It is tiny and impossibly useful. Pick one plan you have been hiding. It should be small enough to be believable. Write one sentence that states what you will deliver, for whom, and the date. Send that sentence to the person you named as your trusted check. Ask them to put a check-in on your calendar. Then set a 5-minute block on your calendar to do the first discrete step toward that delivery. If you cannot do this, then the diagnosis is confirmed and the loop remains intact. If you can do this, then you have begun reprogramming your motor patterns. The work is not brave. It is ordinary. Ordinary acts, repeated, produce extraordinary trajectories. Let me explain what you will feel after you do this. Expect panic for the first hour. Expect your mind to tell stories about sabotage and exposure. That panic is the last gasp of the old habit. It will pass faster if you act into the discomfort. Do the smallest possible next action that moves the plan forward. That action is the antidote. I will give you 2 practical rules that have kept people afloat when the new pattern feels unstable. Rule 1. Default to disclosure. When you are tempted to say, "I can't tell yet," default to telling. Keep the content minimal and the ask specific. The more you practice minimal disclosure, the more you weaken the reflex to hide. Rule 2. Build repair scripts. Prepare 3 short statements you can use when things go wrong. 1 to clients, 1 to collaborators, 1 to your audience. Example: I didn't hit my target last week. Here is what I learned, and here is the next date. Having a script prevents silence and models competence. If you want a single sentence to repeat as you do this work, say, "I will test this in the world and learn." Say it in the morning. Say it when panic rises. This sentence reframes exposure not as threat, but as experiment. It removes drama. It moves you into inquiry. Now a final, sharper mirror. There will be people who say you are too visible or not spiritual enough because you choose commitment over secrecy. Those critiques are real. They exist outside your psyche. They are often projections from people who believe their safety is in secrecy. Do not confuse their need for your silence with wisdom. Their argument about energy is not necessarily a spiritual truth. It is a comfort mechanism. You also will encounter a moral temptation to reinterpret secrecy as virtue. You will find spiritual language that praises privacy as purity. That language is seductive because it offers you moral cover for avoidance. Recognize it. Be generous with those who espouse it, but do not let it become your excuse. Finally, remember 2 essential truths I have seen play out in room after room. Truth 1. Public failure accelerates competence. It hurts. It is awkward, but it provides the corrective early. The alternative, hidden perfectionism, produces a slow, incurable erosion of opportunity. Truth 2. Accountability is social technology. The world does not conspire against you. The world responds to the signals you send. If you show up with consistent, small commitments, people will meet you there. If you signal avoidance, the world will respect that too, by giving you more reasons to hide. So what is the micro step now? It is the one I asked you to do earlier. Do it. Write the sentence. Send the message. Block 5 minutes and begin. That small act is the hinge. It destabilizes the pattern just enough to create possibility. If you get to the end of today and you did nothing, keep your honesty. Do not rationalize. Look at the feelings that stopped you. Name them. Then do the micro step tomorrow. You are not a failure if you have hidden plans. You are human. The habit is common because it works in the short term. My job is to show you that the short-term payoff is the long-term cost. The choice to expose is not about courage as spectacle. It is about humility and craft. It is about choosing iteration over idealization. I will leave you with this. The smallest visible act you take today will be the first deposit in a new ledger. The ledger will not be balanced overnight. It will accumulate proof. It will change the way you move through the world. If you are willing to be visible for 30 days, you will see whether your idea survives in the market of attention. If it survives, you have a product. If not, you have a lesson. Both are preferable to a locked drawer. Thank you for listening this far. If you are willing to share where you are sitting and a single sentence about the plan you hid, write it below. Name one person who will check on you. If you cannot name one person, commit to finding one by the end of the week. Inscribe that on your calendar now. Then act. This is the end of the argument and the beginning of the work. Choose one small public step and keep choosing it again.